here on the top of Daf, Lamed Amid Beis Din Arba Misas Lo Batlu, whatever chiyuv of Misas Bezin you'd be chayav if Sanhedrin was up and running active, you'd be chayav midin shamayim, and Hashamayim will take care of you. For example, and here we have a whole list of examples. Mishan is chayav skila. Let's say violate the Shabbos, he's chayav skila. Then one of the following things is going to never happen to him. Oh, no fil ben agag. The Beis Haskila is 2 floors up from the ground, and he's going to fall off from a gag that's 2 komos up from the ground. Oh, chaya dorsasa. When a lion pounces upon a person, that's called a kind of skila, like the man in the thrust of his body hitting the ground. Mishan is chayav b'sreifa. So what's going to happen to him? Right, sreifa means they take a psila of aver, and it's burning hot, and they pour it down, molten lead, into his throat, and it burns up his insides. Is nofa b'dleika, he himself will fall into a fire, a furnace, and the furnace, the fire, will go into his body and burn up his insides. Nochash makisha, or the toxic substance of a serpent, will go into his body and burn up his body inside. Beheading is nimsal malchus, and generally speaking, that's what they did. The guillotine, they cut your head off. Listim, boy, and all of apparently the listim also used to behead people, like the pirates of old. I don't know what. If he's chayiv chenek, like the case of Zakir Mamik, for example, then otoveh benar, he'll lose his ability to breathe in oxygen when he's drowning underwater. Or base Bisuruchni. Suruchni is what we call askara. Remember the Gemara in Yomi that the 24,000 Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva died of askara. It's a disease that affects your ability to breathe. In any event, we see that Aryeh, which is mentioned here in this list as the substitute misa for skila, right? Because it says here chaya dorsasa, which, let's say it's a lion, and this is a misa b'dei shamayim, because there's no misa b'dei adam after bittul Sanhedrin. There's going to be a misa b'dei shamayim that's appropriate for the crime. Ella says, April, you have to switch it around. There was a mistake in the transmission. Aryeh v'ganvi b'dei shamayim, sinenu pachin b'dei adam. So while the death at Sinin and Pachin is because of a pshia of Adam, the death at the hands of an Aryeh is min hashamayim, is something that was sent to him by the Almighty God. I don't know exactly where Ganve fits in, but somehow the Gemara assumes that the Ganovim are merely shluchim of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they're being sent on a mission. Now we get to Rav. Until now we have Abaye and we have Gzeret Shava, Ason to teach me even on our son b'dei shamayim, which now the Gemara is identifying as chaya or ganev. The law is that he's parted from tashlim. A pasuk in the parish of Molech, which is the name of an avodah zarah that was common at the time of the biblical periods, and they would take their sons and cross them over a fire, and this was done for the purpose of Molech. If a person, a Jew, Chashon, would do such a thing, the Mezid Basra is Chayiv Skila, and this is a pasuk in Vayikra Perek Cha. Im halem yalimu am haaretz eseinei min ha'isha hu betiso mizarola Molech. And if for some reason they look the other way and they don't implement the mitzvahs bezdin, which is skila, which the Torah prescribed in the case of Molech, then the Torah promises besamti aniyas panai ba'ishahu mishpacho v'hichrati osa. Okay, this is kares. Again, if Bezdin was functioning full force properly, they would have put this person to death for violating Molech. However, in event that Halem Yalimu, etc., Esenea, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu steps up, and in place of Misas Bezdin, he will bring about Vichratioso, which is Kares. So Kares is the substitute for Misas Bezdin. Amra Torah, God declares, Kari Shali, Ki Misa Shalachem, Ma Misa Shalachem, Potem and Tachlumin, Af Kari Shali, Potem and So Rava interprets Rabbi Nechuni ben Akanes, deriving it from the Parsha of Molech. My Beinayu, my Ika Bein Rava Labaye. Now the Gemara is going to talk about something called Misa B'dei Shamayim. Like, for example, a Zar who eats Trumas Chayav Misa B'dei Shamayim. And that's one notch lower than Karetz. Zar Shachal Truma Labaye Pot. According to Abaye's interpretation of Nechuni ben Akani, he would not pay the Kohanim for Tashlumi Truma because a Zar Shachal Truma is Chayav Misa B'dei Shamayim. And as we saw in the Exer Shava Abaye Vasan Lasan, any Misa, whether it's B'dei Adam or B'dei Shamayim, is Potem B'nat Tashlumim. Ula Rava Chayav, but Rava has a limud from Molech, and Molech is a case where he's Chayav Karetz, right, as a substitute for Misa B'dei Shamayim, for Misa B'dei Adam. And Karetz is more chamur than Truma, than Azar Shachal Truma, which generates only Misa B'dei Shamayim. So we don't know, according to Rava, that, and there's no basis for assuming so, that according to Rabbi Nechuni ben Akana, in the case of Misa B'dei Shamayim, Rabbi Nechuni ben Akana would say he's part of a Tashlumin. Rabbi Nechuni ben Akana only said in the more severe and serious punishment of Karetz, but he never said it in Misa B'dei Shamayim, which according to Abaye, it all depends upon whether it's B'dei Shamayim or not B'dei Shamayim. Abaye, are you telling me that according to Abaye, if a Zar eats Truma, then he's potter ben atashlumin, meaning according to Rabbi Nechuni ben Akana, and the reason for that is because it's an onesh b'dei shamayim ason ason. Wait a second. We have another principle and another requirement, which even Rabbi Nechuni ben Akana agrees to, as a precondition in applying the principle. We need what's called bi'idna, right on the blackboard. Bi'idna, there has to be a simultaneity of both chiyuvim, of the chiyuv onesh chamur and the chiyuv mama. Now, in the case of a zar shachal truma, as far as paying for the truma is concerned, there's halacha that a person has kavanah to steal something for himself. The very moment he picks it up, he acquires it through kinyan. And therefore, the moment he picks up the truma before he even eats it, he's already chayav to pay compensation to the kohen because he made a kinyan in neva. Whereas the chiyuv, in this case, misa b'dei shamayim, will only be incurred after he eats the truma. And therefore, at that point already, he's chayav in tashlumin because of, and by virtue of, the original kinyan when he picked it up. There's no way you could pack him up for tashlumin. If a person steals chalev from his friend and he eats it, he's chayav, even though eating chalev is a chiyuv kares, and therefore he should certainly be patur from tashlume chalev in this case. But the answer is kevon she'nischay b'gneva kodem shebali de'yisur chalev. At the very moment that he picks up his friend chalev for the purpose of the intention of eating it, he's already chayav in tashlumin on the chalev, and the chiyuv misa only comes later when he eats the chalev. His alma, we see to be idna the ag. The moment that he lifted up the chalev for the purpose of taking it for himself, Anye, he effectuated a kinyan and acquires ownership. And therefore, once he acquires ownership, he's chayav in the tashlumin, and mischayav b'nafshel havi adi ochalei. But he's not chayav kares for eating chalev until he finally swallows the chalev. It's hachinami will apply the exact same structure, mirror image in the case of zar shachal truma. In the Agbe, once he picks up the truma and he wants to take it for himself, he already was Kona B'Kinyan Gneva. Is Hachinami Be'idna the Agbe Kanye. He already is chayiv in tashlumin by virtue of the hagba, which is a kinyan of a gneva. But he's not chayiv as a zar shachol truma until he finally eats it. There's no simultaneity, hence there's no kimle ramidis. How can you tell me that according to Abai, zar shachol truma is potter from tashlumin? I'm sorry, that zar. So let me get that. That. Sorry, just 1 second. Yeah, that zar shachol truma is potter with tashlumin. He already incurred the chiyuv tashlumin before he got to the violation of zaros b'achilas truma, and therefore he was already chayiv in compensation to pay the coin for the truma that he stole. His friend, obviously not such a great friend, but anyway, his friend stuffed his mouth with truma. So he himself ate the truma, but he never actually lifted up the truma. So why is he chayiv for tashlumin? And then Abai says we're going to apply kimle rabbi according to the Menachoni's potter. The chiyuv tashlumin is incurred through what's called hadnoas me'ayin. When the truma goes down to his belly, let's say feels satiated, at that point he incurs two chiyuvim. Number one, he incurs the chiyuv of tashlumin, and number two, the chiyuv of kares. I'm sorry, chiyuv misa b'dei shamayim. Sorry. Now, why is he chayiv for tashlumin? So here's an interesting halach, and Rashi quotes. There are two mechayvim of gneva, and they both operate. Usually we don't need the second one; it's enough to have one of them. And here, tochav lo chaver beis habliya, here we're going to need both of them. The normal chiyuv gneva is generated by a Masechet kinyan. In this case, Hagba. However, the Ochel Es HaTruma was passive. But we'll see about that in a minute, but at least he was passive as far as Hagba is concerned, because the other one, Yenem, he was Tochev L'Tochtiv. So at what point does he incur a Chiyuv Tashlum? And there's another Machayiv Tashlum. And that's called Hana. You have Hana from the object, and it belongs to someone else, that itself generates a chiyuv to pay for that hana. And at that moment, when he had hana because the truma went down into his belly, at that moment he incurred a chiyuv misa b'dei shamayim of zar shachol truma. And therefore he's part of tashlumin because the kimle v'ramine be'idna is simultaneous. Mari asks, wait a minute. Sof came with the law. So you said he put it into his pet. So let's call him Shimon. Shimon must have chewed it up. And at the moment he chews it up, Kanye, that self is a king. Because the object was basically destroyed the moment he chews it up. But the chiyuv of Zar Sha'achal Truma, which the chiyuv Misa B'dei Shamayim, that's only incurred when the truma is down in his belly. So again, we have a problem. There's no be'idna, so he certainly should be chayiv for the le'isa, which generates a chiyuv moment of mazik. Our answer is, right? Reuven didn't put it into Shimon's mouth, but he stuffed it down his throat literally. In which case there was no le'isa. And if there's no le'isa, then the only kinyan that would generate a chiyuv tashlum and ezekiel is when it goes down to his belly. Hanas me'ayin. And at that moment in time, he incurred a chiyuv mitzvah b'dei shamayim by virtue of the fact that he's a zar eating truma. Who wants to say chidom? If although it was stuffed into his throat, he could cough it up, then the header, let him cough it up. And if he doesn't do so, then at that moment already, when he allows the truma to sink down into his esophagus, already at that point, he incurs a chiv tashlumin. He's a mazik. Because at that moment that he's swallowing it, again, it hasn't yet reached his mayayim, but the moment that he's swallowing it, he could have coughed it up and he didn't do so, then he becomes a mazik. Again, the assumption here is that once he swallows it, then it's lost from the whole world. So that for sure he's chayim. But at the moment of Belia, when he could have coughed it up and he didn't do so, at that moment, he incurs a chiv mazik. And he's not chayiv misa b'dei shemayim until it goes down into his belly. But if on the other hand, it was so placed by Reuven so low down in the throat of Shimon that Shimon can't, it's impossible for him to even cough it up, then why should he be chayiv at all? Am I chayiv? What's he chayiv for? Now, again, we have to go through Rashi because when the Gemara is asking is why is he chayiv misa, meaning misa b'dei shemayim? It was all against his will. As far as the Zikin is concerned, then he would be chayiv compensation because it's what we said before, hanos me'ayin. And anyone who has hana from someone else's object is chayiv as a gana. Lo tzricha, I'm going to find a middle category here between the two extremes. The motzi laduri al yedei tcha. If he would put in an extra effort, he would be able to cough it up. And if he would cough it up, then timois. Timois means it's going to be repulsive. And it's worthless for the bailam. The bailam is just going to have to throw it in the rubbish. So therefore, he has a chiv tashlumin of gzela the moment that he decided not to put that extra effort in and cough it up. So in this case, if he would cough it up, it would be mos. So then there's mazik here. But at what point does he incur the chiv mazik? It's got to be at some point when he decides not to make that extra effort to regurgitate the truma. And the Gemara thinks that the critical moment for both his chiv tashlumin and his chiv misa b'dei shamayim for zar shofar truma is the moment it goes down, the moment he, so to speak, swallows it. Again, he doesn't have to actually swallow it, but since he failed to cough up, which he could have done, therefore he's held responsible. And these two chiyuvim are chal simultaneous. But Papa Amar, I don't need this whole business of beis hablia that, he took a piece of truma, lechem shel truma, whatever, and he shoved it down his throat. Kigon, but rather, shetochav lo chaver mashkin shel truma l'tov piv. So Shimon pours mashkin shel truma, like yayin or Shimon, into the mouth of Shimon. And now the yayin becomes mos and repulsive and despicable once it goes into his mouth. He has no chiyuv as a gazlan. Why? Because tochav chavero mashkin topiv, and at that moment already it's mos, so there's no chiyuv tashlum and nizikin at that point because he's not a masik. Again, there's going to be a long discussion in the achronim here why the one who is tochev is not chayiv. So now this victim of the tchiva is only chayiv at the moment that it goes down his throat into his belly. At that point, he's chayiv for zar shachol truma. Rav Ashi Yomi, I have another answer. Zar shachol truma mishalo. A non-Kohen was eating his own truma. Let's say he inherited truma from his grandfather on his mother's side. And on the top of Daf Lamed Aleph, Kara Shirayim Shel Chaver. Okay, so while he's eating truma, he's being mazik his friend. So therefore, the chiyuv misa and the chiyuv tashlumin are simultaneous. At the very moment that he's swallowing the truma, he's a zar, he's ripping his friend's silk garments, and he's potem in a tashlumin through kimle biramin. I mean, this is a pella in this Gemara. Here's where we're going to stop for today. But the pella is that this is a coincidental overlap of two different meisim. He did one meis of ripping his friend's garment, another meis of eating truma. But since they happen simultaneously, we're going to apply kimle biramin. It's the pella. Because normally we assume kimle biramin means that he did one action that generates two chiyuvim. Now, the reason why Rav Ashi introduces his answer with the word zar shachal truma mishalo is because Rav Ashi wants to isolate any possibility of a chiyuv tashlumin until he rips his friend Shirayim. Okay, then that's where we're going to stop for today. It's Hashem. Tomorrow we go back to normal schedule and we'll get to Daf Lamed Aleph. Okay, then. Have a great day.